What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader, also known as John, coming back to you with another Star Wars variant discussion. And wow, what do we have here? Oh my goodness. The vintage Luke Skywalker Farm Boy is absolutely one of the most iconic figures in the original line. He's obviously one of the original 12 figures that was ever produced, and they make so many of them. I mean, there are at least 2 dozen of them that are out there. And I've got a few of them here in front of you, 6 to be exact. Most of them are AFA graded. I do have one CAS graded one, and we'll talk about that. But it's one of my favorite figures in the line, certainly in my top 5, along with the Hoth Stormtrooper, Vader, Boba Fett, and that's really all I can think of off the top of my head. But you know, it's definitely in my top 5, and in no particular order. But I love this figure, if only because they make so many different versions of it. It makes the collectability of these almost infinite. And I've got a few great examples here for you. And we'll talk more about them. So let's just dig right in here, left to right. First of all, here is the first one I got. And this is a Luke Skywalker letter on saber hilt. Hong Kong-based, COO. It's 85 near mint plus, and as you can see, it's got a fairly dark, paint color. If I can get my camera to focus, there you go. And we'll take a close look at him. Very, very bright yellow hair. Letter on the saber hilt. That indicates it's one of the fairly early ones that were out there. It's hard to read it there. I've never actually tried to figure out what letter is on there, but you know, both the Vaders, the Obi-Wans, and I'm trying to get it to focus, but I don't think we're going to be able to get it to. The Vaders, the Luke Skywalkers, and the Obi-Wans, they all came with either letters on the saber hilt or no letters. They're also, if you look towards the top of that saber, you can see kind of a little white node there. That is also usually indicative of a fairly early saber variant. Obviously, I don't have a double telescoping saber, but you can often see little white nodes along the saber for that variation. And for those of you out there who have more knowledge than I do, please do correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. But typically the letters on the saber hilt are pretty desirable. And I know for the Vaders, for example, there's something like 30-something different letter variations. They can be single letters as well as double letters. For example, the 2 Vaders that I have GG and JJ on them, but they can be single letters as well. But you can see the fairly dark paint color there for that one, and the paint colors are just all over the map. I mean, they're all just slightly different shades of paint color. Let's see what we got next. Next we have, if I can get it to focus, it's a uncirculated 85, and this is a China-made variant with blonde hair and light pants. So the China, you can get both the light pants and the dark pants, and that gives you kind of a look at that one there. Another very bright yellow hair, and if you look at it versus even this Hong Kong variant, I mean, it's a pretty significant paint color difference. While the hair remains, about the same kind of color yellow. Next, here we have another blonde-haired Luke with another kind of darker paint color, and I believe this is another Chinese variant, 85 plus. And then this was made obviously in China. That's what the CH means, but so this is a slightly different version of the other Chinese one I have, and you can see the slight difference in paint color. It's so subtle that it's hard to believe that they call those 2 different variations, but they do, at least for the Chinese variants. The next one is an AFA graded one, and I wanted to talk more about this one briefly. You can see the paint color there is very, very dark. CAS does not typically denote paint color variations on their cases. If I can get it to focus, there we go. This is a Taiwan made. So there's Hong Kong, Taiwan, China, and no COO variants for the Lukes. Those are all the ones I know of, but this one came back with an 85 plus. I wanted to talk more about that because somebody had asked me in the comments for a different video, hey, what's the difference in grading scores for CAS versus AFA? In my opinion, this is just my personal opinion on this, but a CAS graded figure usually comes back with a higher score, usually. And the reason I say that is because if you look at the Luke arms and legs, the white part of the arms and legs, you can see a very slight pink tone. And that usually is indicative of figures that have had some sun damage over time or paint wear over time. You're going to have a much more kind of pinkish hue to the white. If you look at his chest color, you can see it's a very bright white versus the arms and the upper portion of the legs here, where it's a little bit more pinkish. In my opinion, this figure would never have received an 85 or even an 85 plus or an 85 if it had been sent in to AFA. That's just my personal opinion on this. I might be completely incorrect. I am not an expert on this stuff, but usually when you see that pinkish hue, that is more indicative, even if everything else is perfect, which in my opinion on this figure it is. The saber is in excellent condition. The legs are in excellent condition. The belt has perfect black color to it. The face, as you can see, has there's no rub around the eyebrows or eyeballs. The black is not worn off. The hair color is very bright yellow. But the limbs and the top of the legs here have some pinkish hue to them. And, if you take a look at them versus, say, the AFA graded ones, you can see the difference in white for the arms especially. Hopefully that's coming through. But the AFA graded one has a very bright white to the arms, whereas this one you can see the difference in color even just from the chest to the arms. That there's some pink there. My guess, if this was submitted to AFA, at best it would get as an 80 plus, at best. So for this to get an 85 plus, I think is being generous. So in general, I think, based on this figure as well as some of the other CAS graded figures that I have, they tend to round up a little bit. Like I said, got an 85 plus, 88.7. It has, in order to get the plus designation on CAS figures, it has to be more than halfway to from between an 85 and a 90, which is what this is. So it's got to be at least an 87.5 in order to get that 85 plus designation. I just don't think that this would get an 85 if it was submitted to AFA, but I could be incorrect. I will say this though, in all fairness to CAS, I have seen a few AFA graded figures where the eyebrows and the eyes of these Lukes are very worn, yet they still got an 85. So, I might be talking completely out of my behind on that. But I just think that given the kind of pink hue to the arms and the white portion of the legs, that I just don't think that they would give this an 85. But anyway, I've got, like I've mentioned in a few of my other videos, I do have a few other G.I. Joes, vintage and modern, that are in grading right now with CAS. Some mail-aways and some G.I. Joe Club exclusives that were kind of sent in poly bags that had to be custom encased in these protective acrylic cases. AFA would not touch them. So I've got those coming. They should be back any day now, to be honest with you. So we'll have some more CAS graded items, especially the vintage items. I'll be curious to see what kind of grades we get on them, because they are straight from the mail-away bags, and they date back, some of them over 30 years old. So I'll be very curious to see how they grade them. And we'll take a closer look at the figures and look for paint rub and any kind of defects, things like that, and just get a sense of what kind of grades we get. But that is my 2 cents on CAS versus AFA. I just, in general, I just think that they're a little bit more lenient. But again, I could be totally wrong on that. It's just based on my experience with the figures I've bought thus far. So the last two are by far the 2 rarest in my collection. As we start to talk about some of these more rare Lukes, obviously the double telescoping saber is a very, very rare variant where the saber tip, the thinner tip, telescopes twice and becomes a very long filament. They were only available on the very, very early Luke Skywalkers, and they're extremely difficult to find for the Vaders and for the Ben Kenobis. I've seen them out there, but they're very rare and very expensive. They go for many, many thousands of dollars. The Lukes Depending on the grade, you can still find one, but you know, again, they're also going to be very expensive. You know, even for a low grade one, you're probably still talking many hundreds of dollars. For an 85 plus, you're probably at least $1,500 to $2,000. So that's one of the more rare ones. That is not actually one of the most expensive Luke Farm Boys out there, at least based on recent sales prices. The most rare deals with hair color. The rarest, you know, you can see the blonde, the different blonde-haired Lukes here. These two obviously have different hair colors, which we'll go over in a second. But one of the more rare Luke Farm Boys is the orange-haired Lukes. That is a no COO variant, if memory serves me. But it's a very kind of pumpkin orange color. Very, very difficult to find. And high-grade figures for those actually go for more expensive than a double telescoping Luke, believe it or not. I mean, to me, I'd much rather have a double telescoping Luke, but I think because of the high rarity of those double telescoping Lukes, I mean, excuse me, of the double telescope, of the orange-haired Lukes, that they go for a lot of money. You know, I'd say that a 85 graded orange-haired Luke can go for as high as I've seen him sell for as high as $3,500, believe it or not. So pretty crazy prices for those. Probably nothing I'll ever have in my collection, but nevertheless, it's a very cool variant. This is a really cool one though. I've loved this one ever since I got it. This was sold to me by a toy broker who, in my opinion, underpriced it. I won't get into what I paid for it. It was a lot of money, but it wasn't nearly as expensive as where they go for now. But this is a olive-haired Luke. Olive-haired dark pants. Yes, it is a no COO. As far as I know, the only certified by AFA olive-haired Lukes are the no COO versions. So, you know, like a Palitoy Tri-Logo type thing. And it came back with an 85. So a very beautiful example and very rare. Again, you know, this was purchased a while ago, but I paid quite a bit less for it than where they go for now. And, you know, it's just a crazy variation. You can really see the kind of olive hint to the hair. And, you know, oftentimes, if they're not graded, it's difficult to tell an olive-haired Luke versus just a normal brown-haired Luke that maybe had some age or sun fading. And so it's a very subtle difference. And I'll show you the dark-haired Luke next to it so you can kind of see the difference in color. But, you know, it's a pretty noticeable difference in color when you put it next to the dark-haired Luke, the dark brown-haired Luke. There is just a brown-haired Luke that's not the dark brown. This is the very dark brown Luke. But there also is another variation where it's just dark. It's just labeled as brown-haired Luke. That one is very, very close to this. It's still a noticeable difference. I just don't have anything to show you right now because I don't have one of those yet. All I have is the dark brown-haired Luke. But when and if I ever get one of just the plain brown-haired Luke as labeled by AFA, we'll compare it to my olive-haired Luke. But I have seen those, and I've kind of compared them on my computer screen versus the one I have, the olive-haired Luke I have here, and it is a difference. But the challenge is knowing whether you have an olive-haired Luke, if it's not graded is what I'm talking about. If you have an ungraded olive-haired Luke versus just a standard brown-haired Luke that's maybe had some sun fading over time. It's very difficult to tell. Me personally, there's no way I could tell the difference between a sun-faded brown-haired Luke versus an olive-haired Luke variation. But that's why we pay those AFA guys all the big bucks. That's why they make a lot of money, is to be able to tell the difference between them. But there is a difference apparently, and they can tell the difference. But the olive-haired Luke does have to be a no COO version, so that does help. It kind of eliminates a lot of the other brown-haired Lukes that are either Taiwan or Hong Kong, or I don't believe there's a China. I think all the Chinese ones are all yellow-haired Lukes, anyway, that's just as my understanding based on what I've seen online. But the last one in my collection is the dark brown-haired Luke, as I talked about. I've shown him in a few other videos. Very, very cool figure. Not particularly rare. It is rare to have a U85 for a loose one. At least as far as I know, it might have changed since then, but this is the only loose graded uncirculated version. Obviously, the AFA is getting rid of the uncirculated designation for loose figures, but as of right now, it's one of the only 85s out there. But a very, very dark brown color. I've seen these in all kinds of different cards. I've never seen them on a vintage Star Wars, original Star Wars card. I'm sure they could be out there, but I've never seen them. This is a Hong Kong variant. I've seen them on the ESB cards as well as on the Return of the Jedi cards. Again, they could be on those original 12 backs or 21 backs, but I've never seen them personally. Again, someone correct me if you've seen them, but anyway, that's just another variation. You can see the paint color there. It's pretty close in color to the olive-haired Luke, in my opinion. This is the olive-haired Luke is listed as a dark pants. There's no pant designation for this one, but it looks very similar to me. I don't see a difference. But anyway, when you start factoring in lettered sabers versus unlettered sabers, double telescoping sabers, pant colors, hair colors, and then obviously country of origin variants, all of those can mix together in different combinations, and so it almost makes collecting these Farm Boy Lukes an infinite proposition. There's just so many different ones out there. At any one time on eBay, even though I've got 6 of them here, at any one time on eBay, I'll just check them out just to see what they're going for, just for fun. And the prices, number one, are all over the map, so you got to be very careful about what you buy and making sure that the price you pay for them is in line with other exact figures. So, take a look at the AFA labeling carefully. Look at how it's labeled, look at the country of origin, and obviously look at the grade. And then try to take a look at closed and sold listings and make sure that you're not overpaying for it, because the prices are just all over the map. I mean, it's crazy. But, what I was getting at is any one time I'll look at what's for sale, actually for sale at any given moment. I'll find 3 or 4 or 5 different Lukes that I don't have in my collection that are still for sale. So even though I've got 6 of them here in front of you. So I think, I've never tried to add them up. I've never looked for a checklist, so to speak, of all the different certified different variations of these Luke Farm Boys. But if I had to throw a random number out, I would say easily there's 15 to 20 at a minimum of different Luke variations you can get between all those different combination categories that we talked about: the pant color, the saber type, the hair color, the country of origin. I mean, it's just almost impossible to collect them all. But nevertheless, it's a cool figure to collect just because of that, because there's so many different variations, and it's certainly one of the most impressive figures in my collection. Just for me personally. I mean, most people who don't know much about Star Wars or these vintage figures that come in my collection, they'll gloss right over these. They don't even realize what they're looking at. But for vintage heads, like any of you who are watching this video, or like me, who see these, you know what you're looking at. I mean, they're just really, really cool figures, and they really tell the story, in my opinion, of the Kenner Star Wars toy line, and it's just an awesome figure to have in your collection, even if you just get one. I mean, it's just awesome. So anyway, I know I rambled way too long, but I've been meaning to kind of talk about these, and because I got that question about CAS grading versus AFA grading, based on my very, very limited experience with CAS, that's my personal opinion that this would never get an 85 plus if it was AFA graded. So thanks again for watching. I hope everyone has a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.